The ballroom at the Hargrove Foundation galas smelled like old money and fresh flowers, and Fletcher Doyle had never felt more out of place in a room full of people pretending not to notice him. He was 41 years old, a licensed plumber who ran a small crew out of a white van with a leaky rear door, and he was wearing a suit he had last worn to his father's funeral 6 years ago. The jacket still fit, mostly. The tie was borrowed from his neighbor Craig, who was 2 inches shorter, and had noticed but said nothing. Fletcher had been invited because of his daughter. That was the simplest way to explain it. His daughter Rosalind, 8 years old, gap-toothed, obsessed with horses and documentary films about ocean creatures, had been selected for the Hargrove Youth Scholarship, one of 12 children in the county, chosen for their academic promise and their financial need. The gala was the annual dinner where donors met recipients, where money and evening wear shook hands with gratitude in rented formal wear, and where parents like Fletcher stood near the edges of the room, holding their children's hands a little too tightly. Rosalind stood beside him now, pressed against his hip in a blue dress that his mother had bought her over the phone, because Fletcher had no idea what an 8-year-old girl was supposed to wear to something like this. The dress had a white satin sash and small pearl buttons down the back, and Rosalind had declared it the most beautiful thing she had ever owned, which had made Fletcher's mother cry a little, which had made Fletcher pretend to be very interested in the weather outside. The girl held a small stuffed fox in the crook of her arm. She had named it Copernicus. She went nowhere without it. "Dad," Rosalind said quietly, tugging at his sleeve, "that man over there has a tie that looks like a fish tank." Fletcher looked. She was right. He didn't say so. The room was enormous. Vaulted ceilings, chandeliers that looked like they'd been designed by someone who had too much money, and a fascination with geometry. Round tables draped in ivory linen, centerpieces of white hydrangeas and eucalyptus that cost more than Fletcher made in a Tuesday. At the far end of the room, a small string quartet played something classical and pleasant that no one was listening to. Fletcher had grown up in Millbrook, Ohio, the son of a man who fixed boilers and a woman who answered phones at a dental office. He had gone to a trade school, not a college. He had built his business from a second-hand truck and a set of tools his uncle left him, and he had done it the way his father had done everything, quietly, consistently, without complaint. He was not ashamed of any of it. But standing in that room, in that suit, surrounded by people who wore wealth the way other people wore skin, he felt the particular loneliness of someone who has arrived somewhere they were not designed for. His wife, Claudette, would have known what to say to these people. She had been easy in rooms like this not because she had grown up in them, but because she had a warmth that made people believe she had always known them. She had died 3 years ago. A Tuesday in February, a highway, a truck that ran a red light. Rosalind still slept with the light on. Fletcher found their table. Number 7. Near the back, which he did not take personally. He pulled out Rosalind's chair first, then his own, and Copernicus the fox was placed on the table with the solemn ceremony only an 8-year-old can manage. The table sat 8. By the time the first course arrived, 6 of the seats were filled with people who had introduced themselves with job titles instead of names. A hedge fund manager, a hospital administrator, someone who described herself as a philanthropic strategist, a couple who seemed to own something large and coastal. They were pleasant the way people are pleasant when they are not really paying attention. Fletcher ate his bread roll and answered questions about what he did with the particular economy of a man who has explained his profession to skeptical people many times. "Plumbing," one of the men said, not unkindly but with the faint note of surprise that Fletcher had learned to recognize. "Residential or commercial?" "Both," Fletcher said. "Mostly commercial now. Schools, hospitals, some municipal contracts. Good money in that," the man said, and moved on. Rosalind was eating her salad with great seriousness, stabbing each piece of lettuce as if it required subduing. Fletcher watched her and felt the specific pride of a father who has raised someone better than himself. The 8th chair at their table remained empty through the first course and into the second. She arrived between the soup and the entree. She came in through a side door near the kitchen, walking quickly, wearing a dress that was several years out of fashion, dark green, floor length, with a hem that had been repaired by hand, the stitching visible if you looked. Her hair was pinned up in a style that had not quite stayed put, and one of her earrings was missing. She was carrying a folder of papers pressed to her chest like it was a shield, and she looked like someone who had driven very fast to get here and had not had time to look in a mirror. Her name, Fletcher would learn later, was Beatrice Wayne. She was 53 years old, and she worked as a custodian at the Roosevelt Elementary School, one of the schools whose students had been nominated for the Hargrove Scholarship. She had been invited as a staff representative. She had not known what that meant exactly, and had assumed it was a formality. She found her seat, the last empty one, at Fletcher's table, and sat down with a small apology to no one in particular, setting her folder carefully beside her plate. Fletcher said hello. She said hello back. She had a kind face that was doing its best to appear calm. What happened next took perhaps 40 seconds, and Fletcher would remember it for the rest of his life. From 2 tables over, there came a sound, quiet laughter, the kind that is meant to be heard. A man in a dark suit leaned toward the woman beside him and said something while nodding in Beatrice's direction. The woman covered her mouth. Beside them, another couple looked away, looked again. Someone made a remark about the dress. Someone else said something about the hair. The laughter spread the way. Laughter at someone else's expense always spreads, sideways in low voices with plausible deniability. Beatrice heard it. Fletcher could see that she heard it in the way her shoulders moved, a slight pulling inward, a quiet collapse of posture that she immediately tried to reverse. She looked down at her folder. She adjusted her fork. She did the things a person does when they are trying to become smaller, without anyone noticing that they are trying. Rosalind heard it too. Fletcher's daughter was 8 years old, and had never been cruel to anyone in her life. She had also inherited her mother's ability to read a room, which was a gift Fletcher had always been grateful for, and occasionally frightened by. She looked at the people who were laughing. She looked at Beatrice. She looked at her father. "Dad," she said, in a voice quiet enough for just the two of them. She looked sad. Fletcher set down his knife. He did not think about it the way people think about things that require courage. He did not weigh the social consequences or calculate the optics. He did it the way he fixed a broken pipe in a school basement at 6 in the morning, because it needed doing, and he was the one standing there. He turned to Beatrice and spoke in a voice that was conversational, easy, the voice he used with everyone. "I'm Fletcher Doyle," he said. "My daughter Rosalind won the scholarship this year. We're both a little out of our depth here." Beatrice looked up. There was a wariness in her face that had been put there by experience. "Beatrice Wayne," she said. "I work at Roosevelt. I keep the lights on, basically. Mop floors. Make sure the kids have clean bathrooms." She said it the way people say things when they're waiting for judgment. "My father fixed boilers," Fletcher said, "his whole life. Put 3 kids through school. I've always thought that kind of work is the reason everything else works." Something shifted in Beatrice's face, not dramatically, the way a shoulder relaxes when a weight is removed. "Your scholarship nominee," she said, glancing at Rosalind. "My scholarship nominee," Fletcher agreed. Rosalind, who had been listening to all of this with her usual precision, leaned across the table toward Beatrice. "Is that your folder?" she asked. "Rosalind?" Fletcher said. "It's all right," Beatrice said, and her voice was warmer now. "It's drawings. The kids at our school, the ones who were nominated, they made drawings for tonight. I was supposed to present them, but I didn't realize there was a presentation, so I just brought them." She looked faintly embarrassed. "I wasn't sure what the protocol was." "Can I see?" Rosalind asked. Beatrice opened the folder. Inside were 12 drawings, crayon and marker on lined paper, the way children draw when they are drawing something that matters, carefully with great attention to color, each one signed at the bottom in careful print. Children in graduation caps. Children at desks with books. One child had drawn what appeared to be themselves in a spacesuit, floating above a city with a star in each hand. Rosalind studied each one with the solemnity she brought to all important things. Then she picked up Copernicus from beside her plate and set him gently on top of the folder, the way you'd leave a note at a door. "He's good luck," she told Beatrice, very seriously. "He can stay with the drawings tonight so they're safe." Beatrice looked at the stuffed fox sitting on top of the folder full of children's artwork, and something happened to her face that Fletcher could not quite describe, except to say that it was the face a person makes when they have been treated with unexpected kindness in a room where they expected nuns. The people 2 tables over had stopped laughing. No one at Fletcher's table said anything. The string quartet played on, indifferent and lovely. The entree arrived. Fletcher ate. Beatrice ate. Rosalind negotiated the situation with the asparagus the way she negotiated all vegetables, with suspicion but ultimate compliance. Over the meal, Fletcher learned that Beatrice had been at Roosevelt for 11 years. Before that she had worked 2 jobs, an overnight cleaning shift at an office building, a morning shift at a school cafeteria, to pay her way through a community college program. She had never finished because her mother had gotten sick. She had a son who was 17 and wanted to be an engineer. She had applied to the Hargrove Foundation herself 3 years ago, on her son's behalf, and had been told he narrowly missed the criteria. He applied again this year, she said, on his own. Didn't tell me until after. Did he get it? Fletcher asked. Beatrice smiled, and it was the first unguarded smile he had seen from her all evening. He finds out next week, she said. By the time the dessert plates were cleared, the people at the 2 nearby tables had become very interested in their own conversations. The man who had made the remark about the dress was now talking loudly about a golf trip to Scotland. The woman who had covered her mouth was asking someone about their extension renovation. None of them looked over. People rarely do, once the moment has passed, because looking over would require acknowledging that the moment happened. The program began at 9. The executive director of the Hargrove Foundation, a tall woman in her 60s named Gwendolyn Marsh, who moved with the precision of someone who had been running things for a long time, took the podium and welcomed the donors and families and staff representatives who had made the evening possible. One by one, the scholarship recipients were called to the front of the room. Rosalind went when her name was called, walking with the particular dignity of a child who has been told that this moment matters. She shook hands with the executive director. She received a small plaque. She said, "Thank you," in a clear, steady voice that made Fletcher press his lips together and stare at a fixed point on the ceiling for a moment. Then Gwendolyn Marsh said, "Before we close this evening, I want to acknowledge something that doesn't always get acknowledged in a room like this. The people who hold these schools together, the custodians, the cafeteria workers, the bus drivers, the aides, they are the reason these children have safe, clean, warm places to learn. Tonight, we have one such person with us. Beatrice Wayne has been part of the Roosevelt Elementary family for 11 years, and she brought something tonight that I'd like everyone to see." Fletcher had not known this was going to happen. He didn't think Beatrice had known either. Gwendolyn nodded toward their table. Beatrice froze for just a moment, the instinct of someone who has spent a lifetime being looked at, and not always favorably, and then she picked up the folder and walked to the front of the room. The drawings were displayed on a projector, one by one. 12 children, 12 small futures drawn in crayon. The room went quiet in the particular way that rooms go quiet when something true has entered them. The last drawing was the astronaut with the stars. Gwendolyn said the child's name. She said the school. She said, "This is what we're here for." The applause started slowly and then filled the room completely. Fletcher clapped until his hands hurt. Rosalind stood on her chair to see better and he let her. Beatrice walked back to the table with the folder and Copernicus tucked under her arm, and her face had in it something that Fletcher recognized because he had felt it himself in the years after Claudette died, the particular disorientation of having been seen, fully, by people you were not expecting. She handed the fox back to Rosalind. "He did his job," she said. "He always does," Rosalind said. After the gala, people moved toward the exits in the usual slow tide of coats and goodbyes. The man who had made the remark about the dress passed very close to their table on the way out. He did not say anything. Fletcher did not expect him to. What he did not expect was Gwendolyn Marsh. She stopped at their table as the room was emptying, coat folded over her arm, with the unhurried manner of someone who has earned the right to move at her own pace. "Mr. Doyle," she said, "I understand your company does commercial plumbing." "Yes," Fletcher said, surprised enough that he said nothing else. "We have 3 foundation properties," she said. "An administrative building, a residential annex for scholarship recipients who need temporary housing, and an older facility we're renovating into a community education center. We've been through 2 contractors in 18 months. I was told the work is complicated, and the previous crews weren't up to it." She handed him a card. "If you're interested in a conversation, I'd appreciate it." Fletcher looked at the card. He looked up. "I'm interested," he said. She nodded once, the nod of a woman who has made decisions in her life and lived with them, and moved toward the exit. Beatrice was watching this exchange with an expression that was trying very hard not to be amused. "You know," she said, "I don't think that's why she stopped by." Fletcher looked at her. "I think that was the reason she gave," Beatrice said. "Because she's a professional. But I watched her watch you for most of the second half of tonight." She folded her folder closed. People like her don't miss much. Rosalind had fallen asleep in her chair, with Copernicus tucked under her chin, the way she fell asleep anywhere when it had been a long day. Fletcher gathered her up, the specific weight of a sleeping child, the warmth of it, and her head settled against his shoulder. "It was good to meet you, Fletcher Doyle," Beatrice said. "It was good to meet you," he said. "I hope your son gets the scholarship." "He will," she said, not wishfully. As a statement of fact, he carried Rosalind through the thinning ballroom, past the ivory tables and the wilting hydrangeas and the chandelier geometries, toward the parking garage where his truck sat between a Jaguar and a Mercedes. The white paint a little scuffed, the right rear door still not quite sealing right. He buckled Rosalind in. She did not wake up. He handed her Copernicus. She held the fox without opening her eyes, the way children hold the things they trust. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment, before starting the engine. He was not thinking about the contract, though he would think about it later. And he would take the meeting. And the work would turn out to be everything Gwendolyn Marsh had described and more. And his crew would do it right. And it would be the beginning of something that would change the shape of his business in ways he had not planned for. He was thinking about his daughter, who had set a stuffed fox on a folder of children's drawings, because a woman at their table looked sad. He was thinking about his father, who had fixed boilers in school basements for 30 years, and whose name was on none of the plaques in any hallway. He was thinking about what it meant to move through a world that did not always make room for you, and to take up space anyway, not aggressively, not apologetically, but the way water moves through a pipe, steadily in the direction it was meant to go, doing the work. He started the truck. The right rear door rattled once and held. He drove his daughter home through the dark.